Who doesn't love a good superhero or superheroine, right? Spider-Man, Wonder Woman, Captain America, Batman, Black Panther. Those are just a few of my favorites. And you know, besides the cool costumes and the incredible powers, I think one of the reasons we love superheroes so much is because when they see something wrong happening around them, they step in and make it right. Over the next few weeks, we're going to talk about that very thing. So let us start by defining injustice together. So when we talk about injustice, we're talking about the things in the world that are unfair, unequal, or not right. Now, there are probably a lot of things that might come to mind when you think about injustices in the world today. Things like children who are starving, families in poverty, natural disasters, or even racism. That's the kind of stuff we know is wrong. But if we're honest, it's also the stuff that feels really big. It feels like stuff we can't do much about. But what if I told you that you have a lot more power to do something about injustices than you realize? What if I told you that right now as a middle schooler, you have the potential to do something about the hurts and wrongs and unfair things that you see going on in the world around you? Here are some things that we can do to get started. First, move close enough to see. You know those eye charts that you have to look at when you go to the eye doctor? It's harder to read the letters or words on them when they're far away, right? The closer you get, the easier it is to recognize what's on the chart. Well, it's the same thing with truth and injustice. If we want to see injustice in the world around us, we have to be brave enough to stay close enough to see it. We can't turn our eyes and shrug it off, even when we feel like it's impossible for us to do something about it. That means maybe getting to know someone at your school who is different than you. It means talking to a few different trusted adults about some of the questions you have about potential injustices you see in your school or your community or even in your own neighborhood. It even means asking God to help you see it, to change the way that you see people and circumstances around you. The second thing is, be curious enough to learn. The quickest way to see injustice is to listen to the people experiencing it. So try that. Stop and listen. When someone tells you about an injustice they've experienced, just listen. Don't argue or change the subject or give your opinion or try to fix it right then and there. One of the first things you can do to act against injustice is to be a listener. The more you listen, the more you'll learn. And the more you learn, the more you'll see. Let me let you in on a secret. We aren't the first people to have this problem. We aren't the first people to experience a world filled with injustices. And we aren't the first people to not notice them from time to time. We aren't the first people who needed a little help opening our eyes and seeing them. I think that's part of the reason Jesus made a habit of pointing out things to people that they hadn't seen or noticed before. In this particular encounter, Jesus was trying to help those who were listening to him speak, understand that part of following him means seeing and caring about the injustices around them. In what we're about to read, Jesus was comparing the righteous people to the unrighteous people. Now, when we talk about righteous people, we're talking about people who do good and want to help others. And when we talk about unrighteous people, we're talking about people who don't do good and aren't wanting to help others. Now, look at what Jesus had to say about this. Maybe you're reading this and thinking what the people who were listening back then thought. What in the world was Jesus talking about right here? When he was hungry or thirsty or needed clothing, when was he sick or in prison? That's not anywhere in the Bible, right? Well, technically, you're right. Those injustices didn't happen directly to Jesus, and so his followers didn't really see them. They didn't recognize that responding to them might be important parts of showing their love for him. But look at how Jesus responded. Check that out. Did you catch that? Jesus was saying that the righteous people are people who see and look for injustices around them. They care about the least of these, which are those who need the most help, feel the most pain, or get the worst treatment. They recognize when someone is hungry, in prison, sick, or left out. They care about it. They act on it. They do something about it. Why? Because in caring for those who are being treated less than or left out, they're showing that they care about what God cares about and that they love the people that God loves. It's easy to think sometimes or something you don't see isn't really there. It's easy to think that because you don't recognize it or aren't impacted by what's going on, and it may not just be that big of a deal to you. And if we want people who do something about it, we have to start seeing it. Remember, before you do something about injustice, you have to see it. Some of your classmates can afford to get a tutor at school, but your family doesn't have the extra money to do that. So you study as much as you can on your own just to get that passing grade. Or maybe you've even participated in an injustice without realizing it, like when you made a hurtful comment on social media that upset someone of a different race than you. You just didn't understand what your comment meant in the first place, so you didn't even see why it was such a big deal. You can't know until you discover and you get curious about it. So be curious about how injustices may be impacting your life and the lives of those around you. Maya Angelou was a famous woman who wrote about injustice a lot. She summed this subject we're talking about up perfectly. She said this: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. That's our hope for this series, that you will see what or who you haven't been before, and then you'll start to act. So let's do that together. Remember, before you do something about injustice, you have to be able to see it. As you heard today, I want you to think about this question. What's one example of an injustice you see in your school, community, or neighborhood?